All right. Well, thank you, Kathy, for joining us. The topic for this presentation will be key topics in early intervention and key questions that the students came up with for their interest in early intervention. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and a bit about your background.
Okay, great. I'm really excited to be meeting with you, Kimberly, and talking about early intervention because it's my passion. So I have my master's from San Francisco State in early childhood special ed, and I've been working in the field for over 30 years. I really love birth to three because you have the opportunity to work in a lot of different types of settings and in different ways. And I've been fortunate to work in center based programs, which are more like a preschool, and the children would come there with their parents. I've worked in a combination center and home based programs where they came to the center 3 mornings a week. And then we also did home visits during the month so that we had that really strong home and a school connection. And then I've done jobs where I'm just doing home visits. I've worked in a program where the parents were regional center clients. So the parents had developmental disabilities, and I was working with them to support their child's development and their parent child connection. I've done consultation with early Head Start programs and also with outpatient substance abuse treatment programs and inpatient substance abuse treatment programs, and consultation with early childhood mental health programs. And then also doing full inclusion work where it's a combination center based and also home visit for children with regional centers. So I feel like this field gives you the opportunity to really grow and also be adaptable to meet the needs that you're seeing in the community where you're working to best support children and families.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much for sharing all of that with your background. I know I was familiar a bit before, but now it's even more helpful to hear about all that background. And like you said, there's so many opportunities, and you have such a wealth of experience and knowledge. So I'm really excited to have
Yeah.
you here.
Yeah.
Thank
And then
you.
I should say now I'm at Life Steps Foundation,
Yeah.
Children and Family Services, and I'm one of the program coordinators. I supervise the staff in the East Bay, and then I also still do home visits and work in our full inclusion program, infant development program. And that shifted to a virtual infant development program. So that's what we've been doing since March. So
Oh,
always needing to change and adapt to what's going on. Yeah.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Especially these days. But that's exciting too that you have that experience you're bringing in as well. And again, you're the perfect person for us to ask these questions to. Um, so the first question that we have is, what do early intervention services look like in the home? And you can chat about either specifically or generally day-to-day tasks or relationships with other service providers, for example. But generally, what do early intervention services look like in the home is
Mhm.
the question.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because there is no like typical home visit. I know you know that
Yeah.
also from your own experiences.
Mhm.
So I would say one of the things it looks like is really forming a parent uh, partnership, a collaborative partnership with parents and families, and having conversations with them about what they want the home visit to look like and what would be most helpful for them. And that can include where to have the home visit. We usually call it a home visit, but we can also go to parks and go to libraries and to children's museums and to Gymboree, and also go to daycare or early Head Start or preschool if that's where the family would like you to provide the service. So um, that's really part of what the natural environment is like going to places where the family would like you to be.
Yeah.
Um, I would say another kind of typical part of a home visit is that we're trying to work from the family's routines
Mhm.
and using what they have available. Um, and that's been a shift in the field. Like for a long time, people came in with a bag of toys and kind of led the session and had their own plan and agenda for what they were going to work on, and they were going to more show the family what to do. And research has shown that it's more effective when you work in partnership with the parents and when you use the routines that they already have in place and then help support enhancing those routines so that they can address the skills that they want their child to be able to do and what would make it easier for them and more satisfying for them. And so I'm definitely gone to what they call bagless. I don't bring toys or materials anymore. Um, and I do more parent coaching. And in a way, I don't always like that term coaching. I really do like collaborative partnership better because I'm not the person telling them what to do. We're
Mhm.
really doing a lot of problem solving together and thinking about what's working well, what would they want to change, um, and then fine tuning things from visit to visit.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing about home visits is you make use of whoever's in the home too. So if the family wants siblings involved, if they want cousins or grandparents or aunts or uncles or neighbors, like you also incorporate them into the home visit, into what's going on. And I would say some of the other parts, just like kind of nuts and bolts, is that in our area, home visits are usually 1 hour a week. Um, and usually just once a week. Sometimes you'll see a child twice a week. That's usually if they have what they consider more intensive needs. So it could be a child who is possibly on the autism spectrum, or else a child who has more significant and multiple developmental challenges and needs a lot of extra support.
Mhm.
We also see some children just every other week if they have some risk factors, but they're doing fairly well, or even once a month just for monitoring. Um, and with each of those situations, it's a little different because the family's priorities are different. And so what those visits look like are a little different. Yeah, and then we do see infants as young as a couple weeks old. Um, and then when children turn 3, then our services end
Mhm.
at that point. So that's another thing that varies home visit from home visit. So you might be working with an infant who has Down syndrome who's 4 weeks old, and then you might be working with a child who just got referred who's like 30 months old
Yeah.
and who may just have like speech and language and self-regulation challenges. And then you may work with a child who has cerebral palsy who's 1.5 years old. And so you just work with a variety of children and families. Being in the Bay Area, there's such diversity of who you work with, and you really learn a lot. It's
Yeah.
a lot of fun. It enriches your life to work with all these different families. Um, I think when you asked about working with other providers,
Mhm.
it depends on what the child's needs are, as far as if they have a speech therapist, OT, or PT,
Yeah.
or a vision specialist or hearing specialist, or, and then there's also early childhood mental health sometimes other social workers. And then maybe teachers that they have, early Head Start teachers. So there's a range of other people who you work with
Yeah.
too. And, I appreciate that most providers want to communicate with each other so that we're really all on the same page and providing consistent messages to parents and building on what each other is doing rather than um, piling additional things on for the family to worry about and think about. And I do find the providers in this area are really willing to collaborate and work well together. And that's how we also build our skills. I've learned a lot from the speech therapists and OTs and PTs and vision specialists and hearing specialists that I've worked with, because we do work with kids with so many needs that you can't know it all, and you're always learning new things from the parents and then also from other providers. But that's what makes it exciting too.
Yeah. Yeah, it truly is. It's like an experience of where you're saying there's a variety of children, families, settings, multidisciplinary team, and you're always learning. And I love all those components you mentioned. We just had a class where we were reviewing the McWilliam article that talked about home visits and working with
Mhm.
families, and you touched upon every single one of them. It's so nice. It was a perfect complement to that article, and then actually a real life,
Mhm.
early interventionist going into the home and talking about your experience. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Really
Well, I
helpful.
don't know in his article if he shares, but he, on his videos, he always shares his little drawing of, like, with the circles and the
Oh yeah.
little pie slit of what your visit is and then what the rest of their week is. And I think that's a really concrete way for families to understand why we want to work in a partnership together and not, nothing we can do in 1 hour a week
Yes.
is going to make a huge difference. But whatever we can do and help support the family that they can do,
Yeah.
is really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy you touched upon that too, because that's been a question that has come up with my students is if it's just 1 hour a week, how is this effective for families? Um, but like as you mentioned, there's that collaborative partnership, and
Mhm.
what you're describing is really helpful for our understanding. Is there anything else you wanted to share about that with the 1 hour week and how it's effective for families considering that dosage time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as I've gotten better at thinking about families' routines and also coaching with families and helping them identify what's working well,
Yeah.
then they feel more successful. So they realize that they're already doing so much to support their child's development, and helping them identify that just makes it easier for them to continue doing that.
Mm.
Um, I think seeing what they're already doing, like with the toys that they have, and being like, sometimes I view myself as like an interpreter,
Mm.
like, oh, when your child this one child the other day picked up a remote, and he was like 12 months. He picked up a remote, and then they're like, oh, that's his favorite toy. But then what we noticed is that he picked up the remote, and then the TV was off, and he turned to look at the TV.
Mm.
So I was like, oh, look, he really understands that the remote is connected to the TV.
Yeah.
And then by accident, he turned it on and he got all excited. And we were like, see, now he's understanding that when he turns it on, something happened and he saw what happened and he knows they're connected.
Yeah.
And we talked about, then he looked at them. So that was a social interaction.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's, you know, being able to share with parents all the simple things that they just kind of are taking for granted that they don't think are big deals, but like those are such rich learning moments.
Yeah.
And the other day, this little one I was working with was so hungry, and she communicated to her mom that she was hungry. And her mom, it was so cool. She just took the laptop with her into the kitchen, and they like made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches together. And she, said to her, "Oh, get a plate for your brother and for you." And so the little one only got one plate. And then the mom said, "You need one more plate." And so she's working on that math so I could talk with her about the math stuff.
Yeah.
They had this, they call them towers. And so she had climbed on this thing. So she was working on like her gross motor skills. She was working on her fine motor with spreading the peanut butter, trying to help open the jar. Her mom worked in shapes because she cut the pieces into halves. And she said, "Oh, look, now they're triangles." So it's all those things that are the concepts we want her to be working on.
Right.
Um, but it's not me teaching it in some isolated way that doesn't have a meaning to their life. And I think parents are so busy. And then when they have multiple services, they're really busy. So
Yeah.
it's really a gift to be able to show them that they're doing what their child needs. Or if we just tweak it a little or add this little component, that they can do it.
Mhm.
So, also sharing things like this one family wanted to increase social interaction. So, talking with them about every time you change your daughter's diaper, is there some game you can play? And the mom's like, "Oh, yeah, she really likes being tickled." And I'm like, "That's perfect." So, every time you change her diaper, play your little tickle game 3 times, and then you can go on and do whatever.
Mhm.
And so, you changed their diaper multiple times a day. She was like less than 18 months old. So,
That's a big.
um, it's just something that they could do easily and not and feel and see the benefit and feel like they were supporting their child's development, but not being an additional thing that they have to do.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I just really love working that way. And I think if you view it that way, it's not the one time or 2 times during your session that they're doing it, but they're doing it multiple times a day because it's part of their routines and what they're always doing. So, I'm not great at math, but it's like if they changed a diaper 5 times a day and they did it 7 days a week, that's 35 opportunities to work on this social game instead of maybe once during a 1 hour session
Mhm.
with me.
Yeah. Oh, those are such great examples and really bring to life what we're talking about as far as the best practices and embedding um, those concerns, priorities in the routines and in your work. And yeah,
Mhm.
that's really, really helpful for you to share those examples with us.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I
Mhm.
could ask so many follow-up questions, but I'm going
Mhm.
to try to stick to the questions we have.
Okay.
um, the next question that my students had interest in was as far as, let's see, there's this question: how do meetings with other IEP members typically work and pan out? And I think this question was more about um, that transition meeting and how do those meetings work with those IEP members coming in? Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Um, So at between 30 and 33 months, um, the regional center case manager will schedule a meeting with the school district and the family.
Mhm.
And so the three of them are always involved. Usually, the case managers, I talk to them and I let them know that I like to participate also. And the families, I discuss it with them too. If it's okay with them, I'd like to participate. And I think letting the families know from the beginning that we're all part of a team that's working together to best support them moving into the next phase is helpful for the family because some people call it transference of relationship. It's like they have a trusting relationship with me, and I'm showing um, that I work well with these other professionals and that we have a relationship, and it helps them feel more trusting of the next step.
Mhm.
So I think it helps support the transition, just having those relationships. So, I mean, my overall theme for this whole discussion is forming relationships. So, it's forming relationships with families, forming relationships with other providers, with case managers, with the IEP teams from the school districts. Having all those relationships really strengthens the services you provide. Um,
That's so
I,
important.
yeah. The families often like at the transition meeting, the IEP process, assessment and IEP process will be discussed, but families often, it's hard for them to process it all and make sense of it. So I often have discussions throughout that whole time period from about 30 months till 3 years about the whole process and just touch base with them to see if they have questions or how things are going or if they've heard from the school district to schedule the assessments. And I let them know that if they want me there at the IEP, I'm happy to go there. Um, and once again, it's not in a like adversary role with the school district, but it's in a where we're all working together to hand them off like smoothly role. So that's kind of how I approach it with the families. But, some families aren't as comfortable speaking up, like, or don't even sometimes know, what questions or what to bring up. So I don't talk for them, but I'll often ask questions, kind of like you're asking me questions today to help support them filling in blanks or adding things that they might be concerned about. I do share resources if they want them about local agencies like the Family Resource Center that they might want to go to trainings there, or they might want to talk with someone there to hear another parent's experience.
Yeah.
Um, I share written information if they want written information.
Yeah.
Um, and some parents don't want too much information, and some parents want way more than I can even provide. So, knowing kind of where to guide them
Yeah.
is helpful. Usually talking with the other providers, like if they have a speech therapist or OT, just kind of touching base. Do you think they're going to qualify? What do you think we should think about at the IEP is helpful um, too. So it's based on parents' needs and what they're telling you they would be helpful for them.
Yeah.
Um, but I would also just say from my daughter had an IEP, and at that meeting I learned that I had wished I had somebody there who would just be a support for me, who knew my child and also could help me um, if there were things that I wasn't communicating well or that I felt like needed more support. I
Yeah.
mean, unfortunately, sometimes school district personnel will take things from another professional more than they will from a parent report. So I think like after having that personal experience, I became even more committed to helping support parents. And I think something people don't think about a lot, and I'm not even sure that a lot of the school district people think about it as much, is that um, like we're the first people that these families have formed relationships with. And it's right when they're first learning that their child has delays and possibly lifelong challenges. And it's a really vulnerable period of their life, and they form a trusting relationship with us. And the work we do is fairly intimate because we are going in their homes and we do know like their extended family and everything. And so it's a very abrupt ending to say at 3 years old they stop services, but they also, they stop it with their infant development specialist, with their speech therapist, OT, PT, um, and their case manager from regional center also changes. Sometimes they're not eligible for regional center anymore, or else if they are eligible, there's a 3-year-old and up case manager. There's a 3 to 5-year-old department. And so they're losing all of these providers who
Yeah.
they have relationships with. They're going to an unknown, and often they can't visit the schools before the IEP meeting. So they don't even have like a sense of what the next step is going to be like.
Right.
And then they may also be having additional assessments. So regional center sometimes does assessments around 3 also to
Mhm.
see if the child's going to have an ongoing eligibility. And that means that it's likely that their child is going to have a lifelong disability,
Yeah.
intellectual disability. And so that also is another thing that they're having to deal with. So all of this happens within a very short time frame, and is very overwhelming for
Yeah.
parents. And
Yeah.
so I just think keeping the big picture in mind is really helpful, and in sharing that we're all there to support the family and the child, and everybody wants what's best for the child is helpful.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so good. One follow-up question I have on that is, are you able to keep in touch with the families after they've transitioned, or anything you want to share about that?
Mhm. So it's a little tricky because our agency's policy, the agency I work with has programs that also are for adults and throughout the lifespan. And so their policy is that we cannot be in contact with a client after they leave for at least 6 months. Um, so for us, what that means is like we can't take the initiative to reach out to parents and check in, but they are always welcome to contact us
Mhm.
and we can respond to them. Um, and so that I do explain that to parents, like, and that I always love to hear from parents. And I like to, sometimes they'll send you pictures and updates, and all of that is really, really nice. But also, they get busy with the next step, and they want to stay in touch, but they also have so much else going on that you don't always hear a lot
Right.
from a lot of them. But there's some families I've been in contact with for a long time, so it
Yeah.
just kind of depends. Yeah.
Right. And we're fortunate to hear that example of a family that you've stayed in contact in another guest presentation we have. Uh, so
Yeah.
note to my students, if you want to hear the example again, you can go back and look at the other guest presentation that we did with working with families. But yeah, I really appreciate you sharing all the details of the transition. It really is a lot that's involved, and also the active role that you play and the emphasis you have on involvement and relationships and
Mhm.
trust. So important. So thank
I
you.
mean, the other thing I would add is like we have to be aware of our own reactions and how we're feeling about what's going to be happening. And, personally, for me, um, when I know the child's going on to a good place next, like it's appropriate services and they'll do really well, or they're doing well and they don't need services. I feel much like I'm still sad to that, like our last visits and stuff, and I miss them, but I feel comfortable that they're moving on. But it's more difficult when there's some uncertainty, like if there is a difference with the school district and the family about what the child needs, or if sometimes the children aren't found eligible, but they're going from having a certain level of support to no support, and you're not sure if that's
Right.
um, how well they'll do, if things have solidified enough that they don't need any support. So
Mm.
those times are a little more difficult,
Yeah.
to have the relationship end.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that's really important to address and for our students to be aware of is
Mhm.
also the experience that you have as an early interventionist and what comes up for you.
Right. And then how that might play out. So you have to be really careful not to let your own
Mhm.
personal feelings play out like at an IEP meeting or with other professionals or with the family, because families can also make their own decisions. And if they're comfortable with what's going on, like you can't impose your own sense of priorities onto it. So it's like really complicated.
Ah,
It's
yeah.
very complicated because you have to be aware of yourself and your own reactions and where is that coming from? Is it coming from you or is it coming from things the family's telling you? And how do you address it with the family? Um, and how do you address it with other professionals? So it's this work is very, very complicated, but it's nice. It makes it interesting.
Right. Absolutely. And also too, I'm hearing that it's a reflective
Mhm.
practice, like
Mhm.
to make sure you're aware of all that that's coming up, you have to be reflecting about your own practice and what comes up
Mhm.
for you, which is another really big topic to talk about. And
Mhm.
that actually you've helped me so much with. Uh, but
Well,
yeah.
I guess that leads into your next question, right? Best practices. And I would say one of the best practices that I hadn't thought of when I wrote my little notes until we just talked about this is getting reflective supervision.
Yes.
So, getting reflective supervision so that you do have a chance to think about these things. And also, when you do home visits, you're really isolated because it's just these one to one settings. You're rarely in an office or, like, so you're not like at a school where you talk to other teachers or stuff. So it can be really isolating doing home visits. And so having the opportunity to consistently and predictably meet with a supervisor to get reflective supervision and help you grow your practice is one of the best practices in the field.
Yeah.
So,
I absolutely agree. And yeah.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and then other best practices are having like we've already talked about the parent involvement,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
The early interventionist is not the expert. We know a lot about the different conditions and different things about development, but parents really truly are the experts on their child, and you have to believe that genuinely.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but you will, over time, you'll find that they will prove you wrong when you think you know better.
Yeah.
Um, that working with the family's priorities and concerns, and also, like we already talked about, working in the natural environment from routines
Yeah.
that they use, using their and natural environment doesn't just mean like the location, but it also means, like I said, routines, materials they use, who they usually do things with, all of that
Yeah.
is part of it. And then also looking at the whole child, it's really hard to separate different birth to three, separate different developmental domains because they're all related. And the most important one is the social emotional
Mm.
domain, and all development springs from that. And
Yeah.
so you really have to work from a relationship based approach
Yeah.
to get all the other skills going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's so nicely said.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking I had some follow-up questions, but then you kept answering them as you were talking. So really nicely answered. Thank you. One other question I have is and this can be our last question, but what are tips to keep in mind when collaborating with other professionals of the EI team? And also, I'm just actually wondering if you feel comfortable answering this, because I know I'm changing the question on you, but I actually am more interested in what are tips you have for my students who are interested in early intervention, if that's
Mhm.
okay for you to answer on the spot. I know I'm putting you on the spot right now,
Yeah.
but if you want to share
I
that.
mean, I think that, you know, tips for doing early intervention is um, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's a really rich field. And so you have lots of opportunities to support children and families in ways that you wouldn't have if you're working in a school.
Yeah.
You can work in all different types of settings. You have the opportunity to really tailor what you're doing to um, the family's needs and the child's needs. And so, if you like things where nothing is the same, like you do not have anything the same day to day, and visit to visit. So, even with the same family, it's just not the same. You never know what's going to come up. If you love to be creative, and problem solve with people and like figure out puzzles, um, it's definitely like a good field for you. um, I think like also, if you like collaborating with people, it's a good field because you really, that's built into it also. You work closely with a lot of other professionals and you learn from them. So I think it's a really great opportunity to learn in all different areas that you wouldn't know as much about. Um, and I think for me, the most important thing is like um, the role that you have early on in a child's life, to help shape
Yeah.
the trajectory of their life. And for a parent to help them see their child for all the wonderful things they can do and the wonderful person they are, and help parents feel competent. And
Mm.
it's just for me, it's really rewarding supporting their relationship with each other.
Mm,
And I don't really view my work as not working with children. And when I started, I thought it was working with babies and toddlers.
yeah,
And, as I've learned and grown in my field, I really truly feel like my relationships with the parents is what's um, the key thing that drives the child's development and also what I get satisfaction from. And I love the children and I love seeing them develop. But I think what makes me feel like what I'm doing is really important is seeing a shift in the parent child relationship and seeing the parent feel effective and empowered and like they're the most important thing in their child's life.
yeah,
So I think this is like I can't imagine doing any other work. This is really truly my passion, and I'm really grateful that I found it. It made me a better mother. It made me a better partner. It's made me a better friend. So it not only like professionally has enriched me, but it's like personally enriched me. And yeah, I'm really honored to be in this field and to have been able to do this for so long.
yeah. Oh, thank you. That was beautiful. um, and just really nicely said. I thought
Mhm.
you hit on so many great components. I really love how you talked about how you've learned throughout your experience in the field the importance of that parent child relationship, and that you're actually, by building a relationship with the parent, you're helping to build that relationship, the parent child relationship. And from that, the child's development uh, can really flourish in that type of,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to get a lot of training in early childhood mental health, but it's the same in early intervention. So it's parallel process. So you treat the parent the way that you want the parent to treat their child. So you want to have the parent feel respected and heard and valued. And the more they experience that, the more they're also able to provide that experience for their child.
Yeah.
Um, and it's the same with the staff I work with. That's what we do with our staff. Like it's just, that's what you do with other professionals. Like you try to create this way of being
Yeah.
um, that is supportive because that's how the children will develop.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that you mentioned the parallel process, and it reminds me a bit of we have one article that's based on adult learning principles, and it talks a bit about how adults learn best when they feel respected and listened to, and all of the things that you mentioned.
Mhm.
And I think for me, when I was getting my training, I didn't get training in adult learning principles, and fortunately, I feel like
Yeah.
my experience at Life Steps Foundation and working with you, I've been able to develop that more. But I didn't get that. And I think it's so important to be aware of.
Yeah. And another thing that I just learned really recently and in coaching workshops that I've been going to
Mm,
is the whole idea of helping parents identify what's the one thing you want to work on. Because like in our enthusiasm to share, like I can even feel myself doing it today. Like I want to share all this information, but at a certain point, people get overwhelmed and then they're just like, oh, I can't do any of it. Like, so, and I do feel like at times I've done that more in my practice, but learning at the end to say, like, we talked about this and this and this. What's one thing you'd like to try before our next appointment or until our next appointment? and finding out from them what they think they could do and what's doable for them,
Yeah.
and not making them feel like they had to remember all the 5 things that we, or 20 things that we talked about, but really just find one thing. And that's what's been really powerful lately for me, is like helping them see that one thing, and then they see the progress they've made, and then they, can pick another thing, but not feeling like I have to share everything I know, like, with them. And that's part of like learning that it's not about you and your own ego, like, and your own need to look like a professional, competent professional, but that it's really, again, the collaborative partnership, what makes sense to them, what's something they feel like they can do so they don't feel guilty about not doing their homework during the week. So, it's just you know, little pieces are very powerful. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Oh, I love that. So powerful, especially being a parent of a very young child. I mean, sometimes just the day-to-day activities can feel so overwhelming, especially if your child has specific developmental challenges or, so I really love that. I haven't heard that before. And that's a really, really great piece of wisdom you just shared. I'm writing this down for myself too. I'm learning as I'm listening. Oh, this has been really wonderful. Is there one thing else you want to share? Speaking of one thing or something we
No, I
didn't touch
think we
upon?
touched base. I mean, I'm always happy to talk to people if they ever want to talk to, about working birth to three. You have my contact information. They can always email or call me. I'm happy to talk to people about this field, because I just obviously love it, and I think it's a great field, and it has, yeah, so much to offer people.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that and also for just being so generous in your time and being willing to share. I know a lot of my students have expressed interest in going into the field of early intervention. A lot of them are working on their credential right now. So some of them may be contacting you, and that's really nice for you to offer that because I know a lot of them are really interested in early intervention.
Great,
And
great.
yeah, which makes me happy because I'm also really passionate about the field.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Well, I'm
you,
gonna go.
Kimberly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. Um,